Welcome back to the show. We're talking about what is right and wrong with Washington. We haven't said much about what's right with Washington, but Jake, I'd asked you the question before the break. How much do the folks in Washington know our elected officials, our congresspeople, our senators, as well as people in the administration, and are they up to the job?
You know, I started out as a small business, you know, in Montana, a little guitar studio, you know, and worked my way through. And we didn't have in those days, we didn't have OSHA, we didn't have EPA, we didn't have ADA, we didn't have all the regulations. You know, I talk to small business people today, they're just scared of Obamacare. They really are. They don't know where they're at. They don't know what it's going to cost them to do insurance. And I think they should have all started out as a small businessman in Lodge Grass, Montana, you know, but I think what it is, we just don't have enough people that really understand business and the problems of business. And what I see happening is more and more people are getting on entitlements. And my parents came from escaped socialism and communism, so I grew up believing that, you know, America's a land of freedom and opportunity, and we're losing that. I think we're losing the opportunity for small businesses to start and grow. And the government just keeps putting more regulation and more laws for small business, and that's sad, really, because, you know, entrepreneurship and small business is really what made America a great country, and we need to go back to thinking that way, with less regulation, less. And the left-leaning socialist movement that we're leaning more and more where people are more dependent on the government, and I think that's wrong. I mean, and I think our politicians we send back there really think that the government should be more involved and that we should depend on the government. And I think the people in America need to understand that that's not the answer. Look at Europe, and look at what happened to Rome and Greece, and what's happening in Europe today, where the countries that are socialistic, it isn't working. Look at North Korea and Cuba and places like that. You know, it doesn't work. What we need is more freedom and more entrepreneurship and individual rights, and the government trying to run our company for us, and that's what they need to understand back in Washington.
Lynn, you look like you might disagree a little bit with what some of Jake said.
Well, I've started up a business. My wife has her own small business as well, and I appreciate what Jake says. She'd probably agree with him on OSHA anyway. But again, American corporations are making record profits, and that tells you that in part the regulations aren't as overburdening as what some people make it out. You have to be reasonable. I think that's the real point here. You can't go too far this way, or you can't go too far in the other direction. And again, because of the special interest, the practical matter is there isn't a vote in Washington, D.C. these days that I haven't seen for sale at some point in time. The elections today cost $5 to $10 million for a representative every 2 years. If you want a Senate seat, it's gotten up to 25 to 75 million. And when people take and give that type of money, they expect something in return. And so that part of the system is clearly broken and isn't working. And so while I think a lot of good, well-intentioned people go to the Hill, what I've seen over time is once they're there for a while, it's like a cancer, it takes them over, and they get more directed towards this special interest or that. We talked about corporate tax rates here not too long ago and noted it was only Korea is higher than us in terms of the stated tax rate, but in terms of what corporations are actually paying, we're in the middle of the real world. And that doesn't include the value-added taxes that they have in places like Europe. If you add those on, our tax rates are perhaps even lower than in some countries when you actually look at what people actually pay. That's not to say that we don't need to fix it, though. If you look at our tax code is, you know, thousands of pages long. No one can get their tax return done these days right, you know, because it's so complex. And yet when you
can always hire Greg.
Yeah, we can. With all due respect to Greg, and I know he does a fabulous job at his firm, his people at his firm do a fabulous job. CPAs don't even get them right. And so we need to simplify things, I think, to some degree, but that means we need to throw the special interest out. The CEO of Caterpillar, and I give him great kudos for this, has come out and said, let's eliminate all the non-typical deductions and start all over. And I think that comment by him, which I think is supported by many CEOs, is a great start. The problem is, once you get to that point, which is something that President Reagan did very successfully with Tip O'Neill, and there's two people on two different sides of the fence. But once you get to that point in time, then all of a sudden we see the business guys come in and say, oh, but give me my depletion if I'm an oil and gas company, or give me an R&D credit if I'm a tech company. And before long, we got this morass again. And we got to get beyond that and start looking at, as I think, as Jake said, what's good for the country and what's going to allow people to create companies with good products and grow jobs. And we just can't get there now.
John, I'm going to give you the last word for this show.
From a tax perspective, I completely agree with you. I want to get back to what you were talking about, American companies making record profits. I work for a 132-year-old company. It is Americana, born in Buffalo, spent over 100 years in Muncie, Indiana, now headquartered out in Colorado. Last year was the first year ever. More of our profits were coming from off-seas than on the shores of the United States. We are a local business. We don't export anything. We don't import anything in what we make. But my point is this, is all the growth, we are driven by what our customers need. And we are the type of company that is exactly what this whole election was about the middle class. We provide middle class jobs. Why is it that companies such as Ball Corporation, we have politicians who love growth and love creating jobs, but they hate those who create it? It is so difficult to find electrical engineers that can work in our facilities because of the education, Jake, you were talking about before. I think this is a very complicated question, but just because people are making profits, don't assume they're being made in the United States. I think a lot of the growth is coming outside the United States, and it's masking some fundamental problems we have in the United States.
See, the big corporations could know how to take care of OSHA and EPA and EEOC and all that stuff, you know. But what it is the smaller businesses that, to me, is the lifeblood of American freedom, is the ones that really can't handle those things, you know. And that's why the big corporations are doing well, because they know how to do it. But small business don't know how to do it. You get an AOC complaint of small business, and it's a real problem.
Right, in terms of if you got to hire a lawyer, it takes your time as the head of the company and all. So we're going to discuss these and other issues. And the second show, what I'd like to do is really talk about what are some specific solutions and what problems should we tackle, what are some solutions, what should our leaders be doing in Washington. So this ends part one of the two-part series of our program on the great economics debate, What is America's Future? I want to thank Greg Anton, Lynn Turner, Jake Jabs, and John Hayes for joining me. They'll all be in part two, so make sure you watch both programs. This is Aaron Harber. Thanks for watching.